The rain battered the roof of the old diner, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in Eli's chest. He sat in the corner booth, staring at the letter in his hands, the words blurring as his world unraveled. His mother's handwriting, once a source of comfort, now felt like a blade twisting in his gut. Eli Carter had always been the good son, growing up in the sleepy town of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania. He'd carried the weight of his family's expectations since he was old enough to understand them. His mother, Diane, a pillar of the community, ran the local church choir and baked pies for every town event, her smile as warm as the summer sun. His father, Tom, a stoic mechanic, taught Eli how to fix cars and, more importantly, how to keep promises. But it was Eli who held the family together, sacrificing his dreams to help pay the mortgage, working late shifts at the hardware store to cover his sister Lila's college tuition, and staying silent when his own heart begged to speak. At 26, Eli had never left Willow Creek. He'd stayed for them for Diane's proud nods, for Tom's quiet claps on the shoulder, for Lila's bright future. But the letter in his hands, delivered that morning by a nervous postman, changed everything. "We need to talk about your choices," it read, the word choices underlined with a venom Eli didn't recognize. Diane had found out about Jamie. Jamie Monroe was the spark Eli hadn't seen coming. They'd met 6 months ago at the town's annual fair, where Jamie, a photographer passing through, had been hired to capture the event. His laugh was loud, his eyes kind, and his camera seemed to see Eli in a way no one else ever had. By the end of the summer, stolen glances had turned into late-night talks by the river, then tentative kisses under the stars. Eli, who'd spent years hiding his truth, fell hard. For the first time, he felt alive. But Willow Creek wasn't kind to people like Eli and Jamie. The town's heart beat with tradition, its veins thick with judgment. Eli had kept their relationship quiet, meeting Jamie in the next county over, telling himself it was to protect them both. He hadn't told his family not yet. He'd planned to, rehearsing the words in his head, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay. I love someone." But now, the letter trembling in his hands told him Diane already knew. The diner door swung open, and Jamie slid into the booth across from him, his dark hair damp from the rain. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, his voice soft but steady. Eli slid the letter across the table, unable to meet Jamie's eyes. As Jamie read, his jaw tightened. "She wants you to stop seeing me," he said. Not a question. Eli nodded, his throat tight. "She says it's a sin, that I'm tearing the family apart." He laughed bitterly. "I gave them everything. Jamie. Everything. And now this." Jamie reached for his hand, but Eli pulled back, glancing at the other diners. The fear of being seen was a reflex he couldn't shake. "What are you going to do?" Jamie asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Eli admitted. He thought of Diane's face, the way she'd always looked at him with pride. He thought of Tom, who'd never spoken a word against him, and Lila, who called him her hero. Could he lose them all for Jamie? For himself? The rain kept falling, and Eli felt the weight of a choice he wasn't ready to make. He didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that Diane's letter was the first crack in a dam about to burst, that the secrets she'd kept would unravel everything he thought he knew about his family, and that love, in all its forms, would demand a courage he wasn't sure he had. That night, Eli drove home through the storm, the letter tucked into his jacket like a ticking bomb. The Carter house, a modest two-story with peeling paint, stood at the edge of town, its porch light flickering. Diane was in the kitchen, kneading dough for tomorrow's church bake sale. The normalcy of it felt like a betrayal. "Mom," Eli said, his voice cracking as he stood in the doorway. She didn't look up. "We need to talk." Diane's hands stilled, flour dusting her apron. "I know what you've been doing," she said, her tone clipped. "With that boy. It's not right. Eli. You know it's not." He'd prepared for anger, but the coldness in her voice cut deeper. "I love him," he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I've never felt this way before." "Why can't you?" "Because it's wrong." Diane snapped, finally meeting his eyes. Hers were red, as if she'd been crying. "You're my son. I raised you better than this. What will people say? What will the church say?" Eli's chest ached. "What about what I say? Doesn't that matter?" Diane turned back to her dough, her silence louder than any shout. Eli wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see him. Instead, he walked out, the door slamming behind him. He didn't see Tom in the living room, watching from the shadows, his face unreadable. The next morning, Eli found Lila at the breakfast table, her college textbooks spread out. She was 19, sharp-witted, and the only one who'd ever made Eli feel like he could be himself. "You okay?" she asked, eyeing his tense shoulders. He hesitated, then told her everything. Jamie, the letter, Diane's words. Lila listened, her expression softening. "I don't care who you love," she said finally. "You're still my big brother." "But Mom, she's not going to let this go." Lila was right. Over the next week, Diane's disapproval became a campaign. She stopped speaking to Eli unless necessary, her silence a weapon. She left Bible verses on his nightstand, each one a condemnation. At church, whispers followed him, eyes that once smiled now narrowed. Eli felt like he was drowning in his own hometown. Jamie, meanwhile, refused to back down. "You don't have to stay here," he said one night as they sat in his beat-up van, parked by the river. "Come with me. I'm leaving for New York next month. We could start over." The idea was intoxicating, a life where Eli could be himself, where love didn't come with a price. But leaving meant abandoning Lila, Tom, the home he'd poured his soul into. It meant giving up on Diane ever understanding. "I can't just run," Eli said, his voice breaking. "They're my family." Jamie's eyes darkened with hurt, but he nodded. "I'll wait," he said. "But not forever." Eli didn't know it yet, but Diane was planning something worse than silence. She'd always been the keeper of the family's secrets, but the one she was about to reveal would shatter Eli's world and force him to decide what family truly meant. Eli woke to the sound of gravel crunching under tires. It was barely dawn, the sky a bruised purple over Willow Creek. He peered out his bedroom window and saw Diane's car pulling out of the driveway, her face set in a way that made his stomach twist. She hadn't spoken to him in days, not since their fight in the kitchen. The silence was heavier than ever, a storm cloud hanging over the house. He dragged himself downstairs, hoping for coffee and a moment of peace. Instead, he found Tom at the kitchen table, a rare sight at this hour. His father's hands were wrapped around a mug, his knuckles white. "Sit down, son," Tom said, his voice low, almost reluctant. Eli's heart sank. Tom never initiated conversations unless something was wrong. "Your mother's gone to see Pastor Reynolds," Tom said, staring into his coffee. "She thinks he can fix this. Fix you." Eli's breath caught. Pastor Reynolds was the kind of man who preached fire and brimstone, whose sermons left no room for mercy. The idea of Diane dragging his private life into the church's spotlight made Eli's skin crawl. "Fix me," he repeated, his voice sharp. "I'm not broken, Dad." Tom's eyes met his, heavy with something Eli couldn't name: guilt. Maybe. Or regret. "I know you think that," Tom said. "But your mother, she's scared. For you. For the family. She believes this is the only way." Eli wanted to shout that love wasn't a sin, that Jamie wasn't a mistake. But the words stuck in his throat. Tom had never been one for arguments. He fixed things: cars, appliances, broken steps. Not this. "What do you believe?" Eli asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tom looked away, his silence a wound. "I believe in keeping this family together," he said finally. "Whatever it takes." The words hit like a punch. Eli stood, his chair scraping against the floor, and walked out before he could say something he'd regret. He needed air. Needed Jamie. He drove to the river, where Jamie was waiting, his camera slung around his neck, capturing the morning mist. Seeing him, Eli felt a flicker of warmth amidst the chaos. "She's taking it to the church," Eli said, his voice shaking as he explained. Jamie's face hardened, but he pulled Eli into a hug, not caring who might see. "You don't have to face this alone," Jamie said. "But you need to decide what you're fighting for." Eli wanted to fight for everything: for Jamie, for his family, for himself. But the town was closing in, the whispers growing louder. That afternoon, he overheard two women at the hardware store, their voices low but clear. "Diane's boy. Such a shame. She's heartbroken." Eli's hands trembled as he rang up their purchase, their pity worse than their judgment. By evening, Diane was back, her face a mask of determination. She didn't mention the pastor, but her eyes held a challenge. At dinner, she announced a family meeting after church on Sunday. "We'll sort this out," she said, her voice cold. "As a family." Eli's stomach churned. He glanced at Lila, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. She'd been his ally, texting him memes to keep his spirits up, slipping him notes that said, "You're enough." But even Lila couldn't shield him from what was coming. Sunday arrived like a guillotine. The church was packed, the air thick with hymns and judgment. Pastor Reynolds' sermon was on straying from the path, his eyes lingering on Eli too long. After the service, Diane led the family to the pastor's office, where Reynolds waited, his Bible open like a weapon. Lila squeezed Eli's hand under the table, but it didn't stop the dread pooling in his chest. "Eli," Reynolds began, his voice dripping with false kindness. "Your mother's concerned about your soul. She's told me about your lifestyle. We want to help you find your way back. Eli's jaw clenched. My way back to what? Hiding who I am. I love Jamie. That's not a sin. Diane gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Don't say that here. She hissed. You're embarrassing us. Tom shifted uncomfortably, saying nothing. Lila, though, leaned forward. He's not embarrassing anyone, she said, her voice steady. You're the ones making this a spectacle. The room fell silent, the tension suffocating. Reynolds cleared his throat. Eli, we're offering you a chance to repent. There's a program, a retreat. It's helped others like you. Eli's blood ran cold. Conversion therapy. He'd heard the stories kids sent away. Broken down. Made to feel less than human. He stood, his chair clattering. I'm not going, he said. And I'm not ashamed. He walked out, Lila following close behind. Diane's voice called after him, but he didn't stop. Outside, the sun was too bright, the air too heavy. Lila grabbed his arm. You did the right thing, she said. But Mom's not done. She's got something else planned. I overheard her talking to Reynolds about a letter not the one she sent you. Eli's heart stopped. Another letter. What else could Diane be hiding? He drove to Jamie's, his mind racing. Jamie listened, his face grim. She's trying to control you, he said. But there's something bigger here. Something she's not telling you. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Diane's face, her cold determination. He thought of Tom's silence, Lila's loyalty, Jamie's love. He'd given his family everything, his time, his dreams, his truth. But what if Diane's secret wasn't just about him? What if it was about the family itself? In the morning, he found a note slipped under his door, in Diane's handwriting. It wasn't addressed to him. It was old, yellowed, dated 20 years ago. The words made his breath catch. I can't tell Tom the truth about Eli. It would destroy us. Eli stared at the paper, his world tilting. What truth? What had Diane been hiding all these years? And why was she revealing it now? Eli's hands shook as he held the yellowed note. The ink faded, but the words searing. I can't tell Tom the truth about Eli. It would destroy us. His mother's handwriting, from 20 years ago, felt like a confession from a stranger. He sat on the edge of his bed, the early morning light casting long shadows across the room. What truth could be so devastating that Diane had kept it hidden for 2 decades? And why slip it under his door now, after weeks of silence and judgment? He needed answers. But the house was quiet. Diane was at the church again, Tom at the garage, and Lila at her part-time job at the library. Eli tucked the note into his pocket and drove to Jamie's, the paper burning a hole in his conscience. Jamie was editing photos in his rented trailer, his face lighting up when Eli arrived until he saw the look in Eli's eyes. Read this, Eli said, handing him the note. Jamie's brow furrowed as he scanned it, his fingers tightening on the edges. What the hell does this mean? He asked. What's she hiding? I don't know, Eli said, pacing. But it's not just about me being gay. This is something else. Something big. He thought of Diane's coldness, her insistence on the church's intervention. Was this her way of justifying her crusade against him? Or was it a warning? Jamie set the note down, his voice gentle but firm. You need to confront her. Eli. No more waiting. If she's got secrets, you deserve to know. Eli nodded, but fear gnawed at him. Confronting Diane meant risking everything, the fragile threads still tying him to his family. But the note was a crack in the foundation of everything he'd believed about them. He couldn't ignore it. That afternoon, he found Diane in the church garden, pruning roses with a precision that belied the chaos she'd unleashed. Mom, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. What's this? He held up the note, watching her face pale. Where did you get that? She whispered, her shears clattering to the ground. You left it for me, Eli said, stepping closer. What truth? Mom, what can't you tell Dad? Diane's eyes darted around, as if the roses could shield her. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I was protecting you. All of us. Protecting me from what? Eli's voice rose, drawing the attention of a passing deacon. He lowered it, but the urgency remained. I've done everything for this family. I deserve the truth. Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. Not here, she said finally. Tonight. At home. The wait was torture. Eli spent the day with Jamie, trying to distract himself, but the note's words looped in his mind. Jamie, sensing his turmoil, stayed close, his presence a quiet anchor. Whatever it is, Jamie said, you're stronger than it. You've already faced the worst. But Eli wasn't so sure. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table with Diane and Tom, Lila hovering nearby, her eyes wide with worry. Diane's hands were clasped tightly, her knuckles white. Tom looked exhausted, as if he'd aged a decade in a week. Tell me, Eli said, placing the note on the table. What's the truth about me? Diane's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. You're not our biological son, she said. The words hit like a freight train. Eli's breath stopped, the room spinning. Lila gasped, and Tom's head dropped into his hands. What? Eli managed, his voice a croak. Diane swallowed hard. We adopted you when you were a baby. Your birth mother, she was troubled, addicted. She left you at the church, and we took you in. We never told you because we wanted you to feel like ours. Completely. Eli's mind reeled. Adopted. The word felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else's life. He thought of every sacrifice, every moment he'd poured into this family, believing he was their blood. Why keep it a secret? He asked, his voice breaking. Why now? Diane's face crumpled. Because of your choices, she said, the word cutting like glass. I thought if you knew you weren't ours, you'd understand why I'm so scared for you. Why I want you to be right. Eli's anger flared. Right. You think being gay makes me less your son. You think a piece of paper changes who I am to you. Tom spoke for the first time, his voice rough. It's not about that, Eli. It's about her fear. She's always been afraid of losing you. To the world. To this. Lila slammed her hand on the table. This is bullshit, she said, tears streaming down her face. He's our family. Biological or not. How could you do this to him? Diane sobbed. But Eli felt numb. He stood, the note crumpling in his fist. You didn't just hide the truth, he said. You used it to control me. To make me feel like I owe you more than I already have. He walked out, the door slamming behind him. The night air was cold, but it couldn't match the ice in his chest. He drove to Jamie's, collapsing into his arms, the weight of the revelation crushing him. Jamie held him, whispering, "You're enough. You've always been enough." But Eli wasn't sure he believed it. The family he'd given everything to wasn't his nod in the way he'd thought. And Diane's betrayal, her attempt to use his adoption to justify her rejection of his love, cut deeper than anything he'd imagined. As he lay awake that night, Jamie's steady breathing beside him, Eli realized the fight wasn't just about love anymore. It was about who he was and who he'd choose to become. The revelation hung over Eli like a fog, thick and disorienting. He wasn't their son, not by blood. At least. The Carter house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage where he'd played a role he didn't fully understand. He stayed with Jamie for days, avoiding Diane's calls, ignoring Tom's hesitant texts. Lila was the only one he let in, her visits to Jamie's trailer a lifeline. She brought coffee and apologies, her eyes red from arguing with their parents. "They're wrong," she said, hugging him tightly. "You're my brother, no matter what." But Eli couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. Diane's words, "your choices," echoed alongside the note's confession. She'd known he was adopted, known his origins, and used it as a weapon to keep him in line. He wondered what else she'd hidden, what other truths she'd buried to maintain her perfect family facade. Jamie, ever patient, gave Eli space but never strayed far. One evening, as they sat on the trailer's steps, watching fireflies blink in the dusk, Jamie spoke. "You don't have to decide anything now," he said, his hand warm on Eli's. "But you can't let her define you. Not her. Not this town." Eli nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He needed to know more about his birth mother, about the life Diane had erased. The next morning, he drove to the church, not for Diane, but for the records. Pastor Reynolds kept meticulous files, and Eli was banking on finding something anything about the baby left on the steps. The church office was quiet, the air heavy with old paper and candle wax. Reynolds was out, but Mrs. Hargrove, the secretary, recognized Eli. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice kind but firm. "Your mother's been upset." "I'm not here for her," Eli said, his tone sharper than intended. "I need the adoption records. From 26 years ago." Mrs. Hargrove hesitated, then sighed. "They're in the back." "But Eli, some things are better left alone." He ignored her, rifling through dusty files until he found a thin folder labeled Carter Adoption. Inside was a single page, his birth mother's name, Sarah Ellis, and a note that she'd left him with a letter, now missing. There was an address in Pittsburgh, long outdated, and a mention of substance issues. Nothing else. No photo. No explanation. Just a ghost who'd given him life and vanished. Eli's chest tightened. Sarah Ellis. A name. but no face. He pocketed the paper and left. The folder's weight heavier than its contents. Back at Jamie's, he shared what he'd found. Jamie's eyes softened. "You want to find her?" he asked. "I don't know," Eli admitted. "But I need to know why Diane kept this from me. Why she's using it now." Jamie suggested they start with public records in Pittsburgh. They spent hours online, tracking down old addresses, court documents, anything tied to Sarah Ellis. They found a trail of arrests, petty theft, drug possession ending in a rehab facility 10 years ago. After that, nothing. She'd either cleaned up or disappeared. The search gave Eli purpose, but it also deepened his anger. Diane had known about Sarah, known her struggles, and never told him. Had she thought he'd turn out like her? Was that why she was so desperate to fix him? That night, Lila called, her voice urgent. "You need to come home," she said. "Mom's planning something. I heard her on the phone with Reynolds. They're talking about a public apology at church for you." Eli's blood ran cold. A public apology meant shaming him in front of the entire congregation, forcing him to renounce Jamie, his identity, everything he was. It was Diane's ultimate move to reclaim control. "She can't do this," he said, his voice shaking. "She thinks she can," Lila said. "Dad's not stopping her. He's broken. Eli. He doesn't know how to handle this." Eli hung up, his mind racing. He looked at Jamie, who was watching him with quiet resolve. "I'm done running," Eli said. "I'm going to that service. I'm telling them the truth." Jamie nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "I'll be there," he said. "Right beside you." Sunday morning dawned clear, the church bells ringing like a call to battle. Eli dressed carefully, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. He thought of Sarah Ellis, a woman he'd never know, and Diane, the mother who'd raised him but couldn't accept him. He thought of Jamie, who'd given him a reason to fight, and Lila, who'd never wavered. The church was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Diane sat in the front pew, her face a mask of determination. Tom was beside her, his eyes fixed on the floor. Lila slipped into the pew behind Eli, squeezing his shoulder. Jamie sat at the back, his presence a quiet strength. Pastor Reynolds took the pulpit, his voice booming about redemption and sacrifice. Then he called Eli forward. "We're here to heal a family," he said, his eyes glinting. "Eli, your mother has asked for this moment to bring you back to God's path." Eli stood, his heart pounding. The congregation's eyes bored into him, some curious, some condemning. He glanced at Diane, saw the hope in her face, and felt a pang of grief for the mother he'd loved. Then he looked at Jamie, and his resolve hardened. "I'm not here to apologize," Eli said, his voice clear and strong. "I'm here to tell you who I am. I'm gay. I love Jamie Monroe. And I'm not ashamed of that." The church erupted in gasps and murmurs. Diane's face crumpled, but Eli kept going. "I've given everything to my family," he said, "but I won't give up who I am. Not for you. Not for anyone." He walked out, head high, Jamie and Lila following. The doors closed behind them, the sound echoing like a final note. But Eli knew this wasn't the end. Diane's secrets, Sarah's ghost, and his own heart were still tangled, waiting to be unraveled. The air outside the church was sharp, slicing through Eli's jacket as he stood on the steps, his breath visible in the cold. Jamie's hand found his, a quiet anchor, while Lila's eyes blazed with pride and worry. The murmurs from inside the church followed them, a chorus of judgment that Eli refused to let define him. He'd spoken his truth, but the weight of Diane's secrets and the sting of her betrayal clung to him like damp clothes. "I'm proud of you," Jamie said, his voice low but fierce. "That took guts." Lila nodded, her arms crossed. "You shook them up. But Mom, she's not going to stop. She's already talking about saving you again." Eli's stomach twisted. Diane's determination was a force he'd underestimated, her love warped by fear and faith. He thought of the note, of Sarah Ellis, and the adoption that had reshaped his life without his knowledge. "I need to find her," he said suddenly. "Sarah, my birth mother. If Diane won't tell me the whole truth, maybe she will." Jamie's eyes softened, but Lila frowned. "Eli, she might not even be alive. And if she is, what if she's not? What you hope?" "I'm not hoping for anything," Eli said, though the lie tasted bitter. "I just need to know who I am, where I came from." The next day, Eli and Jamie drove to Pittsburgh, chasing the last known address for Sarah Ellis. The city was a stark contrast to Willow Creek gritty. Loud. Alive. The address led to a rundown apartment building, its paint peeling like old skin. A neighbor, an older woman with tired eyes, remembered Sarah. "She was here years ago," she said. "Strung out. Always in trouble. Heard she got clean. Moved to a shelter downtown. Good luck finding her." The shelter was a low brick building, its walls plastered with flyers about recovery programs. The director, a kind-faced man named Carl, checked his records. "Sarah Ellis," he said, nodding. "She was here about 8 years ago. Got sober. Started working as a counselor. Last I heard, she was in Philly, helping at a women's center." Eli's heart leapt. She was alive. Real. He thanked Carl, his mind racing. Philly was only a few hours away. He could find her, ask her why she'd left him, what Diane had kept hidden. But doubt crept in. What if she didn't want to see him? What if the truth was worse than the questions? Jamie, sensing his hesitation, squeezed his shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "But you've come this far. Don't stop now." Back in Willow Creek, Diane's campaign intensified. Lila texted Eli updates. Diane was rallying the church, framing Eli's rebellion as a test of faith. She'd even started a prayer group, claiming it was for his soul. Tom, meanwhile, had retreated into silence, working longer hours at the garage. Lila was caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to Eli and pressure from Diane. Eli felt the town closing in, its judgment a weight he couldn't escape. At the hardware store, customers avoided his gaze. Old friends crossed the street when they saw him. But Jamie's presence kept him grounded. They spent evenings planning the trip to Philly, mapping out shelters and centers where Sarah might be. Jamie's optimism was infectious, his belief in Eli unwavering. One night, As they lay in bed, Jamie traced circles on Eli's back. "You're not just doing this for answers," he said. "You're doing it to be free. To know you're enough. No matter what Diane says or what Sarah tells you." Eli's throat tightened. What if I'm not enough? What if Sarah left because I wasn't worth keeping? Jamie pulled him close. Then she missed out on knowing you. But you're not her. You're not Diane. You're Eli Carter. And you're everything to me. The words carried Eli through the next morning, when a call from Lila shattered his fragile calm. "Mom found out you're looking for Sarah," she said, her voice shaking. "She's freaking out. She's coming to the trailer." Eli barely had time to process before Diane's car pulled up. She stormed in, her face a mix of anger and desperation. "You're digging up the past," she said, her voice trembling. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Then tell me," Eli shouted, his patience gone. "Why did you hide her? What are you so afraid of?" Diane's eyes glistened, but her jaw set. "Sarah was a mess. She begged us to take you. Said she couldn't keep you safe. I swore I'd protect you from her. From that life. But now you're throwing it all away for him." She gestured at Jamie, her voice dripping with disdain. Eli stepped forward, his voice low but fierce. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm trying to understand who I am. And you can't stop me." Diane's face crumpled, but she turned and left without another word. Jamie pulled Eli into a hug, but the victory felt hollow. Diane's fear wasn't just about his sexuality, it was about Sarah. About a past she couldn't control. The next day, Eli and Jamie packed for Philly. Lila insisted on coming, her defiance a mirror of Eli's. "You're my family," she said. "I'm not letting you do this alone." As they drove out of Willow Creek, Eli felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Sarah was out there, a piece of his story he'd never known. But Diane's secrets loomed larger than ever, and Eli couldn't shake the feeling that finding Sarah would unravel more than he was ready for. Still, he gripped Jamie's hand, Lila's laughter filling the car, and let himself believe that truth, however painful, was worth chasing. Philadelphia's streets hummed with life, a chaotic pulse that felt worlds away from Willow Creek's quiet judgment. Eli, Jamie, and Lila navigated the city, their car weaving through traffic as they headed for the Women's Center where Sarah Ellis was last known to work. Eli's hands gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, the address scribbled on a scrap of paper burning in his pocket. He hadn't slept, his mind caught between hope and dread. What would Sarah be like? Would she even want to see him? The Women's Center was a modest building, its walls covered in murals of flowers and fists raised in solidarity. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and hope, voices overlapping in a mix of laughter and serious talk. A receptionist, a young woman with bright purple hair, checked their records. "Sarah Ellis," she said, her brow furrowing. "She's here today? Let me get her." Eli's heart pounded as they waited in a small lounge, surrounded by posters about recovery and resilience. Lila squeezed his hand, her eyes wide but encouraging. Jamie sat close, his presence steady. "Whatever happens," he said, "you've got us." A woman appeared in the doorway, her frame thin but strong, her dark hair streaked with gray. She was in her late 40s, her eyes carrying a weight that spoke of hard years. "Eli," she said, her voice soft, almost disbelieving. He nodded, unable to speak, and she stepped closer, her hands trembling. "I'm Sarah." The room seemed to shrink, the world narrowing to this moment. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she studied him, her gaze lingering on his face like she was memorizing it. "You're so grown," she whispered. "I never thought I'd see you." Eli's throat tightened. "Why did you leave me?" The question came out raw, years of wondering packed into 5 words. Sarah's face crumpled. She gestured to a couch, and they sat, Lila and Jamie hovering nearby. "I was a mess," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Addicted. Lost. Barely surviving. I left you at the church because I knew Diane and Tom could give you what I couldn't at home. A chance. I didn't want you to grow up with my mistakes." Eli's chest ached. "You never came back," he said. "Not even to check." Sarah looked down, her hands twisting in her lap. "I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But Diane made it clear she didn't want me near you. Said it was better for you to think they were your only family." I was in no shape to fight her. By the time I got clean, years had passed. I thought you were better off without me. The words cut deep, but they also filled a gap Eli hadn't realized was there. Diane's secrecy wasn't just about protecting him, it was about control. About erasing Sarah to keep her version of family intact. "She never told me," Eli said. "Not until now. And only because she's trying to stop me from being who I am." Sarah's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" He told her everything, his love for Jamie, Diane's letter, the church's pressure, the adoption bombshell. Sarah listened, her face darkening with each word. "She's using your truth against you," she said finally. "I know what that's like. I let her shame me into disappearing. Don't let her do that to you." Eli's anger flared, but so did his resolve. Sarah wasn't the ghost he'd feared, she was real, flawed, and trying to make amends. He wasn't sure if he could forgive her, but he wanted to understand her. "Can we talk more?" he asked. "I want to know you." Sarah's smile was small but genuine. "I'd like that." They spent the day at the center, Sarah sharing stories of her recovery, her work helping others rebuild. Lila, ever curious, asked questions, while Jamie listened, his hand never leaving Eli's. By evening, Eli felt a flicker of something new, not closure, but possibility. Sarah gave him her number, promising to stay in touch. Back in Willow Creek, the air was heavier. Lila got a call from Tom, his voice strained. "Your mother's planning something big," he said. "She's talking to the church board about excommunicating Eli if he doesn't repent. I don't know how to stop her." Eli's stomach dropped. Excommunication meant total ostracism, not just from the church, but from the town that revolved around it. Diane was escalating, her fear turning into a weapon that could destroy him. "I'm not letting her win," Eli said, his voice steady despite the fear. "I'm going back. I'm facing her." Jamie and Lila agreed, their loyalty fierce. They drove back that night, the road stretching dark and endless. Eli thought of Sarah's words, her regret, her strength. He thought of Jamie's love, Lila's defiance. Tom's silence. And he thought of Diane, the mother who'd raised him but couldn't accept him. At home, Diane was waiting, her face a storm of anger and grief. "You went to her," she said, her voice low. "After everything I did for you. You lied to me." Eli shot back. "You kept her from me. You're trying to erase who I am." Diane's eyes flashed. "I'm saving you. From sin. From her. From yourself." Eli stepped closer, his voice calm but unyielding. "You don't get to decide who I am. Not anymore." The standoff felt like the edge of a cliff. Diane's faith, her fear, her love, they were all tangled in her refusal to let go. But Eli was done bending. He'd found Sarah, found himself. Whatever Diane did next, he'd face it with Jamie, with Lila, with the truth. The Carter house was a battlefield, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Eli stood in the living room, facing Diane, her eyes red but resolute. Tom sat on the couch, his hands clasped, avoiding Eli's gaze. Lila hovered by the stairs, her presence a quiet rebellion. The threat of excommunication hung over them, Diane's ultimatum delivered through the church's iron grip. Eli felt the weight of it, but he also felt the fire Sarah's words had ignited in him. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, was fighting for the life he deserved. "Diane," Eli said, dropping the mom that had once come so easily. "You can't force me to be someone I'm not. I've spent my life trying to make you proud, but I'm done apologizing for who I love." Diane's face twisted, a mix of pain and defiance. "You're choosing sin over family," she said. "I raised you to know better. I gave you everything. You gave me a home," Eli said, his voice steady. "But you also gave me secrets. You hid Sarah from me. You hid who I am. And now you're using the church to shame me into submission." Tom flinched, his head lifting. "Eli, that's not," he started. But Diane cut him off. "I protected you," she cried. "Sarah was a wreck. She'd have dragged you down with her. I gave you a life she never could." Eli's jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide what I can handle. You lied to me for 26 years. And now you're punishing me for loving Jamie, for being honest about who I am." Lila stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. "He's right. You're tearing us apart. Mom. Eli's not the one breaking this family, you are." Diane's eyes widened, as if Lila's words were a betrayal she hadn't expected. Tom stood, his voice rough. "Enough. This isn't solving anything. Diane, you're pushing him away. Can't you see that?" For the first time, Diane faltered, her hands trembling. But she straightened, her voice cold. "The church board meets tomorrow. They'll decide what happens next. If you won't repent, Eli, you'll leave us no choice." Eli's heart pounded, but he held her gaze. "I'm not repenting. And I'm not leaving. This is my home, too." He walked out, Jamie waiting in the driveway, his van a beacon in the dark. Lila followed, hugging Eli tightly. "I'm with you," she whispered. "No matter what." That night, Eli and Jamie planned. The church board's decision could turn Willow Creek against him, making life unbearable. But Eli wasn't running, not yet. He called Sarah, her voice a lifeline across the miles. "Stand your ground," she said. "I ran from Diane's judgment once. Don't make my mistake." The next morning, the church was a fortress of whispers. The board meeting was closed. But word spread fast. Diane had presented her case, painting Eli as a lost soul who needed saving. Pastor Reynolds led the charge, his sermons fueling the town's divide. Some supported Diane. Others murmured sympathy for Eli. But the town's heart leaned toward tradition. Eli didn't wait for the verdict. He went to the town square, where a crowd had gathered for a farmer's market. With Jamie and Lila at his side, he climbed onto a bench, his voice carrying over the chatter. "I'm Eli Carter," he said, his heart racing. "You've known me my whole life. I've worked for you, helped you, been part of this town. I'm gay. I love Jamie Monroe. And I'm not ashamed." The crowd stilled, faces a mix of shock, support, and disapproval. Eli kept going. "My mother wants the church to cast me out. But I'm not the one turning away from family she is. I'm asking you to see me, not her fear." A few clapped. Others turned away. Mrs. Hargrove, the church secretary, stepped forward, her eyes kind. "You're braver than most, Eli," she said. "This town's got a long way to go. But you're not alone." The board's decision came that evening, no excommunication, but a formal reprimand, urging Eli to seek guidance. It was a compromise, a way to appease Diane without fully alienating him. But Diane's face, when she heard, was a mask of defeat. She'd lost control, and she knew it. At home, Tom finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have stood up sooner. I don't understand everything, Eli, but I don't want to lose you." Eli's eyes stung. "I needed to hear that," he said, "but I need you to mean it." Tom nodded, his hand reaching for Eli's should dare a small gesture. But a start. Diane, though, remained silent, her faith a wall between them. Eli knew she might never change, but he'd stopped needing her approval. He and Jamie decided to stay in Willow Creek, at least for now. Lila was heading back to college, her hugs fierce and her promise to visit unwavering. Sarah called, offering to come to Willow Creek, to face Diane if Eli needed her. He wasn't ready not yet, but her offer meant more than he could say. As the days passed, Eli felt the town shift, however slightly. Some neighbors smiled again. Others kept their distance. But Eli was done hiding. He'd given everything to his family. But now he was giving something to himself, the freedom to love, to be, to fight for his place in the world. Fall settled over Willow Creek, the leaves turning gold and red. A quiet beauty that belied the town's lingering tension. Eli walked its streets with a new defiance, Jamie's hand often in his, a silent challenge to anyone who stared. The church's reprimand had faded into background noise, but Diane's silence was louder. She hadn't spoken to Eli since the board's decision, her absence a wound that hadn't healed. Yet Eli felt lighter, unburdened by the secrets that had once defined him. He and Jamie moved into a small apartment above the hardware store, a space they made their own with secondhand furniture and Jamie's photos on the walls. Lila visited when she could, her laughter filling the rooms, her stories of college a reminder of the future Eli had helped secure. Tom stopped by too. His visits awkward but earnest. Each one a step toward understanding. "I'm trying," he said one evening, handing Eli a coffee. "It's not easy, but I'm trying." Eli nodded, grateful for the effort. "That's enough for now," he said, and meant it. Sarah became a regular part of his life, their calls turning into long conversations about her past, his present, their shared hope for something better. She sent him a photo from her recovery days, her smile tentative but real. Eli kept it on his nightstand, a reminder that family could be chosen, rebuilt, reclaimed. But Diane remained a shadow. Eli saw her at the grocery store, her cart filled with ingredients for the church bake sale, her eyes avoiding his. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but her rejection of Jamie off him kept him at a distance. Still, he couldn't hate her. She'd raised him, loved him in her way, even if that love came with conditions he could no longer accept. One crisp October morning, Eli got a call from Mrs. Hargrove. "Your mother's at the church," she said. "She's asking for you. Says it's important." Eli's heart raced as he drove over, Jamie beside him. The church was quiet, the sanctuary empty except for Diane, sitting in a pew, a letter in her hands. She looked up as Eli approached, her face softer than he'd seen in months. "I wrote this for you," she said, her voice trembling as she handed him the letter. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know." Eli took it, his hands unsteady. The letter was long, her handwriting shaky but deliberate. She wrote about her fear of losing him, of failing as a mother, of the town's judgment. She admitted to hiding Sarah's existence, believing it would protect him from a painful past. She confessed that his love for Jamie had shaken her faith, not because it was wrong, but because it forced her to question everything she'd been taught. "I don't understand it," she wrote, "but I'm trying to. I love you, Eli. I always have." He looked up, tears blurring his vision. "Why now?" he asked. Diane's eyes were wet. "Because I'm losing you," she said. "And I'd rather lose my pride than my son." It wasn't a full acceptance. Not yet. But it was a crack in the wall. Eli didn't hug her, wasn't ready, but he nodded, the letter heavy in his hands. "I need time," he said. "But I'm glad you wrote this." Jamie squeezed his shoulder as they left, the church doors closing softly behind them. Outside, the air was crisp, the world alive with possibility. Eli felt the weight of the past lift. Just a little. Diane's letter wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning. Months later, Eli stood at the river with Jamie, the same spot where they'd first kissed. The water sparkled under the winter sun, and Jamie's camera clicked, capturing the moment. "You're free now?" Jamie said, lowering the lens, his eyes warm. "Not free," Eli said, smiling. "Just me. And that's enough." He thought of Sarah, rebuilding her life in Philly, of Lila, chasing her dreams at college, of Tom, learning to listen, of Diane, grappling with her faith and her love, and of himself, a man who'd given everything to his family but found the courage to claim his own truth. The town hadn't changed. Not really. Whispers still followed him, and some doors stayed closed. But others opened. Mrs. Hardroves. The diners. The neighbors who'd clapped in the square. Willow Creek was flawed. Like its people. But it was home. And Eli was done running. He took Jamie's hand, the river flowing beside them, and felt the weight of betrayal give way to something stronger, love. Not just for Jamie, but for himself. He'd faced his mother's ultimate betrayal, her secrets. Her shame and come out whole. Not because he'd won, but because he'd chosen to live authentically, to love fiercely, to forgive slowly. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of fire and hope, Eli knew he'd keep fighting for his place, his family, his heart. And that was enough.